Hello, I'm Ruth Seidman. I live in Brookline, Massachusetts, and I'm a retiree. I'm retired from MIT. I was the head of all the engineering and science libraries there. Before that, I worked for the federal government. But I'd like to talk about today as something I did when I was working for the federal government. I was with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and I was there for 12 years. I was in what was called the Boston Regional Office, so I wasn't in Washington. I was there from the very beginning when EPA was founded, and I ran the library for EPA. As I said, it was in addition to the work I was doing running the library and providing information for my agency. And actually, I helped all the 6 New England states with their environmental programs too. Each agency in those days had a civil rights program, and under that civil rights program was the Federal Women's Program. We were responsible for employment of women and minorities in the federal government. At that time, all the high-level executive positions were held by men, and all the technical jobs were held by men. And so my job was to help women get ahead in their careers in the government. And what was really important was to bring in women into the technical jobs, because, as I said, most of the professional jobs were engineers, and they were all men. And we had what was called an affirmative action plan, which I helped write. When I talked to the management people, they would say, "Well, there aren't any women engineers. We can't find them." Well, that wasn't true. There were women. And so one of the things I did there was to network with groups. There was a group called Society of Women Engineers that had a chapter at MIT. There was also an organization called American Women in Science. And I got in touch with these people, and I helped bring women in to be interviewed for the job openings. And we gradually did bring women into some of these jobs. A lot of the men I think they were kind of afraid of what was going on, because the women were starting to organize in a lot of ways. This was just one way we were organizing. And, if they'd see 2 or 3 women in a room talking to each other, they'd say, "What are you girls talking about? What are you planning?" When I took the job, I was still pretty young. I was trained as a librarian, and I was very confident of my knowledge there, but I hadn't had leadership kind of responsibilities, and I wasn't sure if it was something I could do. And I gradually gained confidence, and later on, it was beneficial to me personally too, because I was advocating for other women, but I also learned to advocate for myself. We got together, and one was the Federal Executive Board, which was an overall group of all the federal agencies. It had something called the Women's Opportunity Committee. But the women were all what were called secretaries and other kind of clerks. What we learned from this, we applied to the big thing I'm going to tell you about, which is we were successful in getting a child care center. This was a big project that we did with all the federal these federal agencies, and it was originally we were very ambitious, and we were going to make it federal, state, and city. And we actually were working with state people and people in City Hall, Boston. But so there were a group of us that worked on this. And fortunately, I had experience because I had been one of the founders of the after-school program at what was then the Devotion School. It's now the Ridley School. And my late husband and I were on the group that started that program. So I had some experience in getting a child care center, a child care center going. So what we did, and it was when you ask about problems, one of the big problems was space. Where would it go? Because space was very short. There wasn't much. There was a lack of space for the federal building. There wasn't enough space in the federal building for all the agencies, and they were renting space in other buildings around the city. So it was a lot of competition for space in the federal building. It took us several years, really. You have a picture of our logo. This is our stationery, GCCCC, Government Center Child Care Corporation. And we were very proud of it. There's a picture of our daycare center. I put in a letter. So he congratulated me. He wrote this letter to each of the women. And he said hundreds of federal employees will benefit as a result of your efforts. The resourcefulness, dedication, and hard work displayed by you and other members of the Women's Opportunity Committee is bringing this project to fruition, represent the finest elements of federal service. I was taking on more and more responsibility, but I knew a lot about the personnel system by then because I had to understand it to get some of these other things going. And it got me promoted to a level where I would be, took a position with the Air Force at Hanscom Air Force Base, running a big library with a staff of 20 people and my own building and at a higher grade level. I was at the Air Force for, so when I finished, they had a luncheon in my honor. One of the women engineers who'd come in during the time I'd been working on this also did calligraphy. She had heard me quote Susan B. Anthony, and they gave me this framed quotation: men, their rights, and nothing more. Women, their rights, and nothing less. And it was also the program. And the program is on the back of this. And this quotation. And that really kind of summarizes what we were working on.